Picture this. It's December 16th, 1944. You're an American soldier stationed in the Ardennes forest of Belgium, enjoying what everyone calls the Ghost Front, a quiet sector where nothing ever happens. You're writing a letter home, maybe planning what you'll do for Christmas. The war feels almost over. Germany is beaten. Everyone knows it. Then, at 5:30 in the morning, the earth erupts. Thousands of German artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. Out of the fog and snow emerge 250,000 German soldiers, 1,400 tanks, and the largest offensive Germany has launched since 1940. Your quiet sector has just become hell on earth. But here's the truly insane part. While you're fighting for your life, back in his bunker, Adolf Hitler is smiling. He's just gambled everything Germany has left. Every reserve soldier, every tank, every drop of precious fuel, on a plan his own generals told him was impossible. This is the story of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's final gamble, the largest battle ever fought by the American army, and the moment a desperate dictator destroyed his nation's last chance at survival. By autumn 1944, Nazi Germany was dying, but Adolf Hitler refused to see it. The facts were undeniable. Soviet armies were hammering toward Berlin from the east, having liberated most of Eastern Europe. American and British forces had landed at Normandy, liberated France, and were now at Germany's doorstep. German cities were being reduced to rubble by round-the-clock bombing. Resources were critically low. Experienced soldiers were dead or captured. The Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former power. Any rational leader would have sued for peace, tried to negotiate surrender terms, or at least focused on defending German territory to save lives. Hitler chose none of these options. Instead, in September 1944, he unveiled a plan so audacious, so risky, so divorced from reality, that his top generals, hardened military professionals, thought their Führer had finally lost his mind completely. The plan: launch a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest in Belgium, split the Allied armies, race 100 miles to capture the vital port of Antwerp, encircle and destroy 4 Allied armies, and force the Western powers to negotiate peace. Then, with the Western Front secured, turn all forces east to fight the Soviets. Simple, right? Field Marshal von Rundstedt, Germany's most experienced commander, listened to Hitler's plan and reportedly said, "This plan hasn't got a damned leg to stand on." Model, another top general, calculated they would need 3 times the fuel Hitler allocated, twice the time, and perfect weather conditions. The plan required everything to go right, and the Allies to do nothing effectively in response. Hitler didn't care. This wasn't a military decision anymore. It was the move of a desperate gambler who had already lost everything, but refused to leave the table. What happened next was actually impressive in a terrifying way. Despite Germany's collapsing infrastructure and resources, Hitler managed to scrape together a formidable force and hide it from Allied intelligence. Over 200,000 troops were assembled in complete secrecy. Veterans were pulled from other fronts. Boys as young as 16 were drafted and given minimal training. The Volkssturm, Germany's last-ditch home guard, was mobilized. Anyone who could hold a rifle was sent to the Ardennes. 1,400 tanks and assault guns were gathered, including Germany's fearsome new King Tigers. 70-ton monsters with armor so thick, American shells bounced off. Artillery pieces by the thousands. supplies hoarded from across the Reich. All of this was moved at night, under camouflage, with complete radio silence. German soldiers were forbidden to talk about their movements. Dummy radio traffic was transmitted from other locations to fool Allied listening posts, and it worked. American intelligence completely missed the buildup. Allied commanders believed Germany was finished, incapable of offensive operations. The Ardennes was considered a rest area, where green troops could gain experience and exhausted veterans could recover. The Americans were about to pay dearly for that assumption. At 5:30 a.m. on December 16, 1944, the quiet of the Ardennes forest was shattered by the largest artillery barrage the Western Front had seen in months. American soldiers who moments before had been sleeping, eating breakfast, or warming themselves by fires suddenly found themselves in the middle of hell. Shells rained down without warning. Then, out of the fog and snow, came the German army. Panzer tanks emerged like steel ghosts. Infantry in winter camouflage seemed to materialize from the forest. Experienced SS units hit the American lines with devastating force. The American units, many of them inexperienced, spread thin along an 80-mile front, completely surprised, did what they could. Some fought heroically. Some retreated in confusion. Some were overrun before they could even organize resistance. Within hours, German forces had punched massive holes in American lines. Thousands of American soldiers were captured. Equipment was abandoned. Panic spread. At Malmedy, in one of the war's most notorious atrocities, SS troops machine-gunned 84 captured American soldiers in a field. The massacre would steel American resolve. There would be no mercy for SS units after that. By the end of the first day, Hitler's gamble seemed to be paying off. The Germans had achieved complete surprise and were driving deep into Allied territory. A massive bulge was forming in the American lines, giving the battle its eventual name. For the next week, German forces drove forward with desperation, born of knowing this was their last chance. By December 24th, Christmas Eve, they had penetrated 50 miles into Allied territory. American forces were reeling. The situation looked dire. Some units were surrounded. Others were in full retreat. German tanks were closer to Allied headquarters than they had been since 1940. At Supreme Headquarters, there was real concern. What if the Germans actually reached Antwerp? What if they did split the Allied armies? But cracks were already showing in Hitler's master plan. First, fuel. German tanks were running dry. The plan had depended on capturing American fuel depots, but American forces, despite being surprised and overwhelmed, had managed to deny or destroy fuel supplies. German tank commanders watched in despair as their massive Panthers and Tigers sputtered to a halt, out of gas, becoming nothing more than expensive pillboxes. Second, resistance. Despite being surprised, American units were fighting with unexpected tenacity. Small groups held critical crossroads. Artillery units stayed at their guns even when enemy tanks appeared. Engineers blew bridges at the last possible moment. The American line bent dangerously, but it didn't break. Third, Bastogne. Bastogne was a small Belgian town that shouldn't have mattered, but it sat at a critical crossroads. 7 roads converged there. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the region. When German forces surrounded the town, they trapped the American 101st Airborne Division, the Screaming Eagles, inside. These were elite paratroopers, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, low on ammunition, freezing, and running out of medical supplies. On December the 22nd, German commanders sent a formal surrender demand. The situation was hopeless, they argued. Further resistance was pointless. Surrender with honor. The message reached Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st. He read it, thought for a moment, and gave a response that would become legendary. Nuts! His staff initially thought he was joking, but McAuliffe was serious. That single word was sent back to the confused German commanders as the official American response. The 101st Airborne held Bastogne against overwhelming odds. They fought in brutal conditions, temperatures dropping to 20 below zero, snow everywhere, wounded freezing to death because they couldn't be evacuated. But they held. On December 26th, Patton's Third Army, in one of history's great logistical miracles, completed a 90-degree turn and smashed through German lines to relieve Bastogne. The siege was broken. Hitler's timetable was shattered. On December 23rd, something happened that spelled doom for the German offensive. The weather cleared. For a week, fog and snow had grounded Allied aircraft. German forces had moved without fear of air attack. But when the skies cleared, Allied air power, thousands of fighters and bombers, descended like avenging angels. German columns were strafed and bombed mercilessly. Fuel trucks exploded. Supply lines were cut. Tank concentrations were devastated. The Luftwaffe tried to contest the skies and was swept aside. Germany simply didn't have enough planes or fuel or pilots anymore. From that moment, the German offensive was doomed. Without air cover, without fuel, against increasingly stiff American resistance, the attack ground to a halt. By early January 1945, it was over. The Bulge in Allied lines was pushed back. Every inch of ground Germany had gained was retaken. The offensive had failed completely, but the cost was staggering. American casualties, approximately 90,000, including 19,000 dead. It was the bloodiest battle the U.S. Army fought in World War II. German casualties, over 100,000, including irreplaceable veterans, tanks, and aircraft. Germany's last mobile reserves were destroyed. The final experienced soldiers were dead or captured. Here's the crushing irony. Hitler's gamble didn't just fail. It accelerated Germany's defeat. Those 200,000 troops, 1,400 tanks, and precious fuel could have been used to defend Germany's borders. Instead, Hitler threw them into an offensive with no realistic chance of success. When it failed, Germany had nothing left. In January 1945, the Soviets launched a massive offensive on the Eastern Front and encountered minimal resistance because Germany had squandered its reserves in the Ardennes. By March, American forces were crossing the Rhine. By May, Germany surrendered. The Battle of the Bulge didn't delay Germany's defeat. It hastened it by approximately 3 months, according to historians. Hitler's final gamble proved several things: that he was completely detached from military reality. His generals knew the offensive was suicide. He ordered it anyway. That American soldiers, despite being surprised and initially thrown back, could fight with courage and determination that earned even their enemies respect. That desperation makes terrible strategy. Hitler gambled everything on a plan that required miracles, and reality doesn't deliver miracles. The Battle of the Bulge was the largest land battle fought on the Western Front. More American troops participated than in any other World War II battle. It was brutal, costly, and fought in horrific winter conditions. But when the snow cleared and the guns fell silent, one thing was certain. Hitler had rolled the dice one final time and lost everything. The war would be over in 4 months. The Ardennes offensive didn't save Germany. It buried it.